Chapter 129. 2. Matters related to the recruitment trials. Hearing that, Qin Fong then nodded his head in satisfaction. After the level of your gift and talents have been tested, you will then select your area of expertise and go through another round of trials where you'll then be allocated to one of the 5 departments. A representative would be chosen from each of those departments to be an examiner, and once you manage to pass that stage, then you can consider yourself to have formally passed the admission. Having spoken up till here, he had almost told them everything there was to tell. Qin Fong looked at Yin Shiwu and Yin Shiro and said, "Both of you will still have to work harder, or it will be hard for you to pass the gift testing stage. People like Qing Bei, who is a dual element wielder, need not worry at all, and as for Qing Yu..." He paused a moment, thinking that she still had not revealed her true powers. Qing Yu is also skilled in medicine, and there will be 2 departments for her to choose from at that time. What I am worried about will be the 2 of you. Yin Shiro and Yin Shiwu lowered their heads, feeling a little ashamed of themselves. Seeing them like that, Qin Fong sighed. In this remaining 1 month, I will do everything I can to bring up your powers, and both of you will have to work extra hard at it with me. The 2 of them then chorused in unison. We'll have to trouble Senior to work with us more. Qing Yu and Qing Bei found themselves left alone without anything much to do. With the kind of power they possessed, there was nothing much for Qin Fong to worry about. After giving them a little more instructions, he then allowed them to leave. "Sis, which department do you think we will be allocated into when we are accepted into the Faint Mist sect?" When he had heard Qin Fong explain about the various departments, he had already wanted to ask her this question. Hearing that, Qing Yu raised her eyes and looked at him. "What? You want to stick by my side?" Qing Bei scratched his head. "I just wanted to ask, that's all. It's all the same whether we are together or not, as we'll still be in the same sect, so we'll be able to see each other anytime anyway." Qing Yu's lips stiffened a brief moment before they arced up into a smile. "It is good that you think that way, as we will be segregated according to the things we are good at, and we might not be placed together. But even if I am not with you, with your current level of powers, no one will dare to bully you easily." Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. Qing Bei nodded his head and then went on to ask, "Then are you thinking of joining the Elixir Cultivator Department or the Martial Arts Department?" In actual fact, he really wanted to be placed together with Qing Yu. Moreover, he has come to learn a little bit about elixir cultivation, so he might be able to bluff his way through in there. But when he saw the brief look of displeasure on Qing Yu's face just now, the words that had been on the tip of his tongue were then quickly swallowed back down. Maybe Qing Yu just wanted him to be more independent. When he was alone, he could be strong, resolute, and show unsurpassing wisdom. But after being with Qing Yu for too long, he had grown to become so used to relying on her. Chapter 129. 3. Matters related to the recruitment trials. All things aside, it might have been because back in his most painful and agonizing days when he was younger, where he had felt most utterly helpless, with the countless number of times that he had wanted to end his own life when the torment from purging the poison became too much to bear, she had been the one who had always pulled him back from the edge of darkness, remaining by his side as he endured through the darkest years of his life. His heart just wanted to rely on her for no reason, as that was the person he trusted the most, and the one and only kin he had. Seeing the look in the eyes of the youth change several times, Qing Yu knew that he was deep in thought about things again. Her slender fingers were suddenly placed on top of his head, which ruffled his hair vigorously. It was probably because she had not done that action that warmed his heart for a rather long time that caused the youth to freeze in his spot. It was said that a man's head was not to be carelessly touched, even for a man who was not yet fully grown, and it was naturally the same thing for Qing Bei. But every time he resisted, he would find his head violated even harder, and he became used to it over time. So when Qing Yu stopped ruffling his hair, he felt a little unused to it. Ever since they started to prepare themselves to join the Faint Mist sect, the 2 people had been working very hard to raise their powers, so he had not felt that heartwarming action for a rather long time. Qing Yu looked at the youth's doleful eyes like those of a tiny animal, and she stretched her hand out to ruffle his head another time. "Did you think I was angry? Weren't you angry?" Qing Bei pushed the question right back at her. Qing Yu raised an eyebrow. "Why should I be angry?" Hearing that, Qing Yu hesitated a moment. If I am to go join the elixir cultivator department with you, you would not get angry? Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU, what is there to be angry about? If you are able to get yourself in, then go ahead. Qingyu said as she looked at him in amusement. Moreover, when did I ever say that I am going to the elixir cultivation department? With my knowledge in medicine, will I still need to go in there to learn anything? If she were to join the elixir cultivator department, it was undoubtedly just be a waste of time and energy for her. Compared to the things written in the heavenly insights of medicine, the medical practice in these lands were far inferior. Then are you intending to join the martial arts department? I heard that this department has the most number of people and 2/3 of the people throughout the lands are martial arts pugilists, so there are no lack of highly skilled experts in there, so it will be hard to gain attention and be favored in there. Qingbei said after thinking about that for a while. Qingyu shook her head, smiling as she said, I do not want to join either of these two. I am a little more interested in the Spirit Master Department and that special department founded by the top-ranked disciple of the Inner Circle. Qingbei blinked his eyes in surprise. The Spirit Master Department has very high requirements for one's mental strength, which is at least 10 times that of most normal people. As for that special department, it is said that there are not even 20 in numbers. 3 among the top 5 ranks are from the special department while the other 2 has 1 artifact cultivator and a spirit master. I fear that it will be a little difficult for you to join these 2 departments. Chapter 129. 4. Matters related to the recruitment trials, so what? Qingyu looked at him out of the corner of her eyes. If you do not go give it a try, how would you know you will not be able to pass? When she mentioned that, Qingyu suddenly turned to look at him with a glint in her eyes. I feel that little Bei should go give being a spirit master a try because you have very strong mental strength. Didn't you say that whenever you want to know about something, you just have to think about it and it will automatically appear in your mind? That's right. Qingbei nodded. Qingyu went on to explain. You might not be aware, but that is one of the abilities of a spirit master. If you did not possess strong mental strength, you will not be able to have such a good sense of things. Qingbei's eyes widened in disbelief as he pointed a finger at himself in a baffled daze. Are you saying, I have the gift of being a spirit master? Qingyu smiled and nodded. If that is really the case, then I must really go give it a try on the day of the recruitment trials. Qingbei seemed to be greatly motivated, suddenly hoping that the day would come earlier. And on another side, Luo Junyao, who had been feeling a strange sense of unease in his heart, had come to discover the source of that unease. Tell it to me one more time. What do you mean by the person has gone missing? The man's low and alluringly magnetic voice sounded like a curse sent down by the gods, piercing deep into the ears of the person who had his head bowed respectfully below. It was just a short statement made in a soft voice, but it caused the person to immediately fall to the ground on his knees. My lord, please quell your rage. Several of the lieutenants are already searching as hard as they can, and they will surely be able to find some clues. The person had steeled himself against the terrifying aura pressing down on him and said in a trembling voice. The man with mesmerizing violet eyes then said scornfully in a chilling voice, If they are really able to handle it, then they would not have made you come report to me. The man's head sank down even lower, unable to find any words to say, because what the Lord said was true. It had already been more than half a month since the incident, and the few of them knew deep in their hearts that they were not able to hide it any longer. So they had ordered him to come down from cloud heaven and report the matter to seek for an opinion on a way for them to resolve it. Lu Junyao's tall figure suddenly straightened as he got up to his feet, the aura around him a little cryptic and his voice deep as he said, I will deal with the matter myself. You go back and tell them to stop all the searches. Do not let any of the other powers notice a single thing. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU, although that man did not know what Lu Junyao meant by what he said, but he did not dare to say anything against him. There was nothing he could do but to go back and carry out his orders. Silence was restored back to the large room, and Lu Junyao stood there looking out at the scenery outside the window. Light and darkness intertwined within his eyes as a dark tide surged, like something was brewing up quietly within. Could it really be all so coincidental? The body in the dark regions had disappeared, and the cries he had recently heard calling out. Everything seemed to be vaguely conveying a certain message to him, a message that one did not dare to be certain of, but was already clear to see. Chapter 130. 1. There's treasure at the bottom of the lake. Cloud Heaven's western edge, headquarters of the barbarians. Because they lived in lands of vast roiling sandstorms, the barbarians have constructed tall towers that kept out the wind. For hundreds of years before this, their homeland had been swallowed up countless times by sandstorms which caused many deaths of their people. So the tribe chief had gotten craftsmen to carefully build these sandbreak towers, and they had not suffered any more casualties. The people of the tribe living in peace and remained detached from the world. You're awake. The flap of the tent was suddenly lifted and a girl that was about 10 years old came walking in, lively and pretty-looking, with 2 adorable braids on her hair, her large sparkling eyes filled with joy as she looked at the person inside. Looking at the person seated upright in the bed, at first glance, she looked almost like a celestial being. Luxurious hair draped over her shoulders. Against that fiery red clothes she was wearing, she was breathtakingly beautiful. She lifted her head when she heard that voice. The magnificently dazzling beauty of that flawless countenance was like that of a celestial being who had accidentally fallen into the mortal realm, pure and pristine. Her limpid eyes so clear one couldn't possibly bear to profane them. A flawless beauty throughout, where even when her brows were creased in a frown like this, people just could not take their eyes off her. The little girl stared enraptured, and it was a good while before she regained her senses, looking a little embarrassed as she said, "Are you feeling unwell in any place?" I am an elixir cultivator, and I can help to take a look at it for you." The woman's slightly vacant stare then slowly regained its focus, and her eyes then turned to look at the bashful little girl who had her head lowered as she went on to say softly, "Were you the one who saved me?" "Thank you." Not only did the beautiful woman possess unforgettable looks, even her voice was highly enchanting, like jade beads falling onto a plate, lightly drumming on one's heart that elicited a gentle ripple. 2 pink clouds immediately blossomed on the girl's tiny face. "No need for thanks. It's great that you're fine." Speaking about that, the little girl then looked at the woman with the astonished but measuring gaze. "When I rescued you and brought you back, your spirit body was so weak that you could barely be seen. So how did you even come to have gained a flesh body now?" Although she had not touched the lady, but it was clear to see that she possessed a solid flesh body. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU. Hearing that, the woman's gaze dimmed and her fair, slender fingers rose up to gently touch her own cheek, seemingly far away in thought. She clearly remembered that her flesh body had been destroyed, broken into pieces and horrifying to see. She couldn't really remember where she had been living all these years, and the reason she had died. Everything was a foggy blur, and there seemed to be a voice in her heart that told her she must not die. She must live as someone is waiting for her, and will always wait for her. But who is that person? She really cannot remember. Something felt like it exploded in her head, and the pain was excruciatingly painful. She raised her hands up to hold her head, trying her very best to suppress the agony. Chapter 130. 2. There's treasure at the bottom of the lake. Are you all right? The little girl was shocked to see the woman like that, and she quickly went over to her. When she came to touch the woman's body, she discovered that her body was icy cold, without the slightest bit of warmth. The little girl was startled by the icy touch, and she immediately retracted her hand. That kind of temperature was like that of a dead person, but she could still clearly talk and move. She doesn't look like a dead person in any way. The little girl's pretty little face creased up, and she held the woman's hand as she injected her spirit energy into it. In the next instant, the little girl's eyes widened incredulously. How? There was only a weak puff of her main spirit soul in her body, and all the other parts of a spirit soul were missing. What kind of a person could possibly be so devoid of morals to be capable of doing something like this? It must be known that if one's spirit soul was deficient, they could easily lose their minds and become crazy, or in a worst-case scenario, their lifespans would become greatly reduced, unable to live past several years. And though the woman did not show any signs of having lost her mind, but she seemed to be in a rather bad condition. Her body was so cold, like she had been dead for a long time, and The little girl then asked in a worried voice, "Do you remember who you are?" The woman who had her hands wrapped around her head was suddenly startled a moment before she slowly lifted her eyes up to look at the little girl. I am. Who is she?" "Fair, you must always remember me. Even if I am dead, you must not forget me." "Whose voice is that?" The woman was a little muddled. "Is she Fair?" Seeing the state the woman was in, how could one possibly not be able to see that her spirit soul was deficient? Although she was not crazy, but it was clear she had lost her memory of her past and could not remember her own identity. The little girl really didn't know whether it was a good thing to have saved the woman and brought her back here. The little girl then sighed slightly. "Don't worry. I will definitely help you regain your memory." Although the barbarians were the least contentious tribe of people in Cloud Heaven, who peacefully kept to themselves within a confined region, but they were a race of people who have existed the longest here in these lands. There were many secret ancient techniques in the tribe, and it would not be too difficult for them to help her find back the lost fragments of her spirit soul. But there was just one hurdle that would be rather difficult to overcome. She had secretly brought this woman back without anyone's knowledge, and if she were to employ the tribe's secret technique, somebody would surely find out. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU and Grandpa really did not like people who were not of their tribe, so if he knew that she had brought in an outsider and had even used the secret technique to save her, not only she herself would be punished, but the woman would definitely not be able to survive as well. The little girl's eyes dimmed and her gaze turned to look at the woman on the bed once again. Without knowing why, she just seemed to feel very close to the woman, and that was why she had secretly brought her back here. Regarding this matter, she would have to think up a foolproof plan first. It was already deep into the night, and a fluffy and fleshy ball of snow was lying upon the table, where its tiny legs would kick out a couple of times occasionally, while its tiny little mouth would then smack its lips together softly. Chapter 133. There's treasure at the bottom of the lake. It was only when she went closer that she discovered that the little fellow was plopped there soundly asleep, its delicate little mouth open like it was dreaming of something delicious to eat. A thin, transparent sliver of drool was flowing out from the corner of its mouth as it dripped with a soft patter, forming into a tiny puddle below. Qingyu shook her head in amusement, and she went over to carry the little fella up. Although the little beast was asleep, but it was still alert as it quickly came awake. It was only when it smelled the familiar scent that it then let down its guard, to softly call out to its mother. "Shush, mother will carry you over to the soft lounge to sleep. It is too cold there on the table at night." Qingyu cooed in a gentle voice, and then put the little beast down on the soft lounge that was quite near to the bed, even covering a blanket over it. Although Meatball had a nice coat of fur to keep itself warm and was not afraid of the cold, but the young lady's actions made the little beast feel highly touched. Its limpid, wide blue eyes looked lovingly at her for a moment, but it could not fight off the dozy bug, its eyelids closing as it drifted back to sleep. The little beast was not as active and wild as most spirit beasts, but was obedient and quiet, usually either only eating or sleeping. What was strange was that it did not grow in size at all, but was still just a tiny fluff ball. She really did not know what species of a spirit beast it really was, but she liked it quite a lot, so she just continued to keep it by her side. She was just about to undress and go to bed when she suddenly froze in her actions, her gaze turning to a particular spot, her expression seemingly a little impatient before she went walking outside with light, quiet steps. Her sense of hearing was just too sharp, so she would always come to pick up noises that others were not able to hear. It was the same remote courtyard where Nudie stayed in, but there was never a speck of dust throughout the years. Circle upon circle of ripples splashed across the lake's surface, as if something had fallen into the water. Qingyu walked over there feeling a little suspicious. It was probably that bunch of guys again. What could they really be up to coming all the way here instead of sleeping so late into the night? But when she got closer to the place, she did not see anything at all. Besides the ripples over the water's surface, it was quiet without any other sound. Could she have heard wrongly? Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU, but as she was going to raise her foot to walk away, she felt a chill behind her back, the hair on the back of her neck standing. The weather had been great the past few days, and hence the moon was exceptionally bright and clear. but a huge shadow of something suddenly appeared slowly, gradually blocking out the moon, turning the surroundings a pitch-dark black. She sensed danger that made her skin crawl, like all her blood had suddenly froze, turning her already chilly body temperature an icy cold. What is that? Just when she wanted to turn around to look, a hand suddenly stretched out from the edge of the lake and grabbed onto her ankle, quickly dragging her into the water. At that same moment, the enormous shadow flew fleetingly over the lake's surface at an alarming speed. Chapter 130. 4. There's treasure at the bottom of the lake. If Qingyu had not been dragged into the water, she would have been attacked by that thing at this moment. Underwater, the shocked and surprised Qingyu almost swallowed a mouthful of water. Fortunately, she had reacted quickly enough to immediately hold her breath and put up a water isolation barrier, which kept the water out, allowing her to move freely underwater. When she raised her eyes up, she then came to see who the person that had dragged her in was. The culprit's violet eyes were exceptionally dazzling under the night, and they were filled with a smile as they looked at her. "Are you all right? Why are you here?" Qingyu asked in surprise. Lu Junyao curled up his lips. Who did you think it was? For a young lady to not be sleeping so late at night, but had come to such a deserted place like this, aren't you afraid that you'll meet with danger? Hearing that, a corner of Qingyu's lips twitched and she retorted in an unfriendly tone. This is my house. Why would I not dare to come here? But as for you, I heard that you're somebody of considerable status in Cloud Heaven. For you to break into somebody's house so sneakily in the middle of the night and is now criticizing me instead, those are actions that ill befits what a gentleman would do. Her words were harsh, and even Su Liamo had turned red upon hearing those words back then. Unexpectedly, she had really underestimated this man's thick hide as he quietly waited for the young lady to finish before blinking his eyes innocently at her. When have I ever once claimed myself to be a gentleman? Qingyu held back the urge to scold somebody. She was after all a well-brought-up lady, and she would not allow herself to lose her decorum with just a few words from this man. Just what are you guys really up to here? Is there some kind of treasure in this lake? Qingyu asked with her brows tightly knitted up. Every time she wanted to rest, she would come to hear sounds that would not allow her to sleep peacefully. So she had started to think that it was rather strange that they had come to show so much interest in this lake. Lu Junyao's eyes darkened, but he did not speak. There was indeed a treasure in this lake, and it was more precious than any kind of treasure there was. Qingyu saw that he did not seem like he wanted to disclose much, and she did not probe further. She was about to swim back ashore when she was pulled her wrist back down, due to the buoyancy of the water. That pull dragged her crashing straight into the man's chest. Though the water greatly reduced the impact of the collision, it also pushed the two of them to stick tightly together. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU instinctively, Qingyu was going to struggle, but the man stretched a hand out to clasp around her waist, holding her down firmly in his embrace. Qingyu's body stiffened, and she froze completely. She had never liked to have too much bodily contact with people, and the person she was closest to was just Qingbei. And this man here had repeatedly hugged her. Of course, she was completely aware of the fact that in the few times that she had been injured and fallen unconscious, he had already held her in his arms several times already. Chapter 131. 1. Are you trying to seduce me? Just as anger was rising up inside her heart, she then heard the man's low voice sound out beside her ear. Don't move, it's still up there. Qingyu was taken aback. It? A black shadow suddenly floated past over the lake's surface, kicking up a series of waves on the water. Qingyu then came to understand why he was not letting her go up, and she did not make any more rash moves but asked in a soft voice, What is that? Lu Junyao gave a helpless sigh. When I came here earlier, I had clearly not detected the presence of any other living creature like that. But when I used my consciousness to probe the bottom of the pond, it suddenly came out to attack me. Judging from that fella's body and the way it looks, I would say that it is a three-legged devilwing. The three-legged devilwing was a beast that could fly and walk, which looked a little like an eagle, with a malevolent face. It was said that its enormous wings, when spread wide, would be able to block out the sun and the sky, bring darkness wherever it passes. although the highest level such spirit beasts could reach was only level 10, but it had a trait that was feared, and it really gave people a headache. It bore grudges and was very vindictive. Even among the spirit beasts, few dared to offend the three-legged devilwing. If there was anyone audacious enough to kill a three-legged devilwing, then congratulations to you. From then onwards, that person would be relentlessly pursued and persecuted by the entire three-legged devilwing species. Even if that person were to alter his looks completely, the unique scent that would remain on the person who killed the three-legged would still allow all of them to detect him. Hence, when one encountered this kind of a spirit beast, it would be best that they keep a distance away from them. One would have been puzzled why someone like Lu Junyao with his level of cultivation would need to hide himself underwater from a spirit beast of such a low level. So it was actually due to the unforgiving and persistent inborn trait of the three-legged devilwing. Qingyu was just thinking about that when she suddenly could not hold herself back and burst out in laughter. One would not need to think much to know just how depressing it would be for that man at that moment. Lu Junyao saw her laugh and was a little puzzled for a moment, but he quickly caught on to what she was laughing about. That frustrated him, and he pinched the tender flesh at the young lady's waist as he asked, "You dare to laugh? If I had not saved you earlier, you would already have been swallowed up by that thing in one big gulp." But that one pinch caused the two people to freeze in their spots. Lu Junyao seemed to be surprised that the little fox's body was so soft, and her waist was even more slender than before. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. Yu Qingyu was just startled by his actions. How could this man pinch her so blatantly? Putting aside the fact that he had embraced her as the circumstances were dire, but here he is getting more and more overboard. In both her lives, no man has ever dared to do that to her before. The young lady's beautiful eyes looked like they were burning with two balls of flame as she stared vehemently at him. "What?" Lu Junyao saw her eyes and arched up an eyebrow to ask. Qingyu gritted her teeth silently and then said, pausing between every single syllable, "Men and women should keep an appropriate distance between themselves. Can you please release your hand?" Chapter 131. 2. Are you seducing me? The man's eyebrow raised up higher and lowered his eyes to look. His hand was still clasped around the young lady's waist at that moment, holding her tightly against him. Their bodies were so close there wasn't even a gap between them, and he could even feel her heartbeat. It was probably because she had been pulled into the water so suddenly, and she had struggled a bit just now that the young lady's clothes were now in slight disarray. Her tightly bound and closed color had somehow loosened, opening up slightly, which exposed a patch of fair white skin and a beautiful set of collarbone, causing the man's deep violet eyes to suddenly dim. He could still recall the time when she had been injured while undoing the curse he had been afflicted with. Her clothes had been stained with blood, and he had wanted to help her change the clothes. But when he saw her beautifully slender neck had no sign of an Adam's apple, that was when he realized that she was really a girl. Her disguise had been so real, deceiving him for such a long time without being discovered, that the handsome, proud, and unyielding youth was actually a beautiful and alluring girl. She had not shown the slightest sign of being a prissy young lady back then, but when dressed in women's clothing, every single one of her gestures and mannerisms was just so enchanting and seductive. Even with her staring at him so furiously now, it was probably because that tiny face was just too exquisitely mesmerizing. Her elongated phoenix-like eyes so alluring, that was just so seductive whichever way he looked at her. Lu Junyao then laughed softly, his hand with well-defined lines suddenly covering her eyes. "You must not look at me like that all the time." Everything before her suddenly gone dark. Qingyu was taken aback and she clenched her jaws tightly as she said, "What are you really intending to do? Hasn't anyone told you that your eyes are just too mesmerizing?" The man's low, magnetic, and sexy voice that was tinged with mirth rolled inside his chest, that felt as if a tiny soft brush gently grazed past her heart, a tingly little feeling. Qingyu went speechless for a moment. Her eyes that were covered blinked a couple of times, her long lashes lightly tickling the man's palm. After a good while, she then said in an emotionless tone, "Do you always tease young ladies like that? You've really opened my eyes to a whole new world." Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. Lu Junyao sensed that her tone of voice sounded a little cold, and he immediately released his grip, his eyes serious as he looked at her, looking like he minded the fact that she had misunderstood him. Tease? I have never ever teased any ladies before. What a joke. He was the top man in the dark regions. Would he need to lower himself so much to go tease anyone at all? Because that woman in the Bright Moon Temple had come to indicate her admiration for him, it caused a rumor to spread like mad throughout the entire cloud heaven that he was involved with that woman for a period. That made all the other women who had always thrown him coy looks of admiration or harbored secret wishes towards him either openly or secretly to completely give up on any ideas they might have towards him. For no other reason than the fact that any man who caught the sight of the Bright Moon Temple's Temple Lord, as cloud heaven's greatest beauty of all, how could they possibly hope to compete? They might as well just give up. Because of that incident, Lu Junyao came to feel nothing but utter disgust for women from then on, and any woman who even cast their eyes his way a second time would infuriate him, so much he had wanted to have their eyes dug out. Chapter 131. 3. Are you seducing me? So, something like him teasing young ladies could not possibly exist. Qingyu was stumped for words when she saw the stern and serious expression on his face. It was a while before she managed to find her own voice. If you haven't done it, then it's all good. Why are you getting so worked up? This is a serious problem. Lu Junyao continued to say very seriously. In order to avoid having you misunderstand, I have to let you know that the Lord you will come to pledge your loyalty to is a man of upright integrity and strict with himself, who will never ever cause you to be ashamed, so you should really seriously consider it. Qingyu then queried, Lord, was she misunderstanding something here? Why can't she understand what he is talking about? Lu Junyao nodded. A little crafty fox like you, who is hiding so many secrets inside, and also possess skills in medicine that everyone covets, it is inevitable that you will attract the eye of people with dubious intentions. Only if you come with me to cloud heaven and remain by my side will I then be able to protect you. Qingyu found herself at a loss for words. Where was this man getting all his confidence from? What does he mean by saying only he can protect her? Qingyu almost burst out laughing from anger as she looked at him out of the corner of her eye. I come at a very high price and I fear that you will not be able to afford it. Hearing that, the corners of Lu Junyao's mouth curled up into an incredibly puzzling smile. I have not much of anything else but just too much of those things in gold and silver. If you like them, it doesn't matter even if I am to give them all to you. Both he and Bai Jiyin had really given it a lot of thought, seeking to coax her into going to cloud heaven with them. Qingyu just smiled and held his words to heart. She lifted her eyes to look up and saw that the moon had shown itself above. Thinking that the three-legged devilwing must be gone, she moved her body thinking to swim up to the surface. Behind her, the man stared at her back and suddenly parted his lips. Aren't you curious what is really at the bottom of this lake? Qingyu paused. Without even turning her head, she replied, That is your own business and has nothing to do with me. What if it does have something to do with you? Lu Junyao then asked. He was thinking that his guess was highly possibly correct. If it was true, then even if it was merely to make her request to go up into cloud heaven of her own accord, she should be made aware of it. As expected, Qingyu turned herself around when she heard those words, the look in her eyes complicated. What are you trying to say? Lu Junyao's lips arced up slightly, and he held her with an arm, bringing her down deeper into the water. Because they were encased in water isolation barriers, they were no obstructed in any way underwater. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. Your mother is someone from cloud heaven, and you have probably already guessed that. Lu Junyao suddenly said softly. Qingyu acknowledged softly. Do you wish to see her? Lu Junyao then asked. Qingyu was stunned. She is still alive? As she thought, what Yin Su told her was not the entire truth. Or at least, the part where she died from complications during birth was something she did not believe at all. Chapter 131. 4. Are you seducing me? Lu Junyao saw how careful she was in getting her own hopes up, and he sighed lightly. She has died, but you also can't really say she is completely dead. What do you mean? Qingyu asked with her brows furrowed up, not really understanding what he was saying. Her flesh body is still completely intact, but her spirit soul isn't whole, fragmented and scattered across the various realms. If her spirit soul is fully gathered together, she can then be revived. Lu Junyao explained. After hearing him explain, Qingyu's fingers unconsciously tightened together. Why was her spirit soul broken up? It is a long story, and it encompasses reasons that even I do not know about as well. The tone of Lu Junyao's voice sounded a little helpless, and he then turned to look at her. Pausing for a moment, he then told her. It seemed like it was because of a man. Several chaotic scenes suddenly flashed in Qingyu's mind. One was azure as hell with the sky turned a blood-red shade, a red-clothed woman and a black-robed man tightly locked in an embrace. The dagger in her hand was plunged in the man's chest, the smile on those lips one of despair, sorrowfully beautiful. Another one was of a man and woman ribbing each other in playful banter, their fingers interlocked with each other's, their heads together. A joyful scene of happy bliss. These images flashed quickly through her mind, so fast that Qingyu thought that she had been mistaken and had just imagined it. But deep down inside, she just knew that all of that had really happened in the past, as she had seen this several times in her dreams. Because of a man? Qingyu did not want to think any deeper into it, but she has just come to realize something. That man was killed by that woman's own hands, but she had smiled so sorrowfully after that and said, "We can finally be together at last." So after the man died, she had then chosen the most painful way to die. She destroyed all her cultivation, her spirit soul torn viciously apart, to suffer every bit of that brutal and tragic torment. But Qingyu had clearly been able to feel just how much in love they had been. So why had they come to such a sorry end? She did not know how much time had passed, but her feet finally had something to stand on. They had reached the bottom of the lake. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU before them. A gigantic clamshell sat half open, letting out a faint glow of light. A faint translucent figure of a person could be seen lying quietly inside, all curled up and not moving at all. Qingyu froze, like her feet had rooted themselves into the ground, unable to muster up the courage to walk forward to see. It's really here. Lu Junyao's gaze sharpened. After so many years, he had finally found a sliver of Ant Land's aura. It had been so close to where he was, and he had never once thought that the first fragment of the spirit soul he would find would be in a place like this. It was probably because she was unable to leave her very own flesh and blood behind. Chapter 132. 1. Indiscernible palpitations. He turned around to look at the young lady beside him and saw that the expression on her face a rather grim, and the hands at her sides were unconsciously tightly clenched up as she stood there in hesitation, not daring to go forward at all, seeming very nervous. Lu Junyao could not help but laugh and then patted her softly on the shoulder as he said in a gentle voice, "That is just a sliver of a spirit soul, and it does not have its own consciousness, so it would not be able to speak. There is no need for you to be so nervous." Hearing that, Qingyu then lifted her eyes up to look at him. When she received an affirming look from that pair of violet eyes, she then went walking slowly forward. She crouched down lightly, watching that ephemeral sliver of spirit soul carefully. What she saw was really just a human-shaped figure, and its facial features could not be seen, so she was not able to ascertain anything from it. But for some unknown reason, an indescribable feeling came to rise up inside her. There was a sudden feeling of closeness and love, an amazing telepathic touch on the soul. She was suddenly at a loss, not knowing what to do as she had never lost her composure like this before. Her parents from her past life had already left her before she was even able to see them at all. She had grown up under the care of her very strict grandfather. Grandfather had never showed her any concern with soft and gentle words, but just asked her to work hard on her cultivation, admonishing her harshly with a fierce face when she committed a wrong, and nothing else. Hence, her personality turned to become cold. She did not know what kinship was like. Maybe when she was young, before she came to realize the kind of romantic love Qing Tianlin had towards her, she had foolishly thought that was the kind of care and concern from a kin. At that moment, she remained there in a crouch, staring unblinkingly at the weak glow of the spirit soul. Her gaze was filled with longing, and her eyes were misted over. It was a most natural emotion that arose from deep within, one that she was unable to resist at all. She reached her hand out slowly, wanting to go touch, and a miracle happened right at that moment. Even Lu Junyao's irises had enlarged in incredulity for an instant. The figure whose facial features could not be seen, the spirit soul that did not possess the slightest inkling of consciousness, then suddenly seemed to be drawn to some unseen force, where a part of its hand suddenly moved, slowing rising up, before it slowly moved to come touch the young lady's outstretched hand. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. It was clear to see that it should have been impossible to touch. The ephemeral spirit soul would surely pass right through. But in that instant, she seemed to have felt the deeply entrenched feelings that poured out from that spirit soul. Lu Junyao. She heard her own voice trembling slightly. How do we bring her away from here? Lu Junyao looked at her through narrowed eyes and then spread his palm open. A water spirit pearl about the size of a baby's fist suddenly appeared, and the spirit soul inside the clamshell then delved itself inside on its own. This is a soul-nourishing orb. Her spirit soul is too weak and needs to recuperate in there, Lu Junyao said, and the orb then gradually disappeared from his hand. The two people then swam up to the water surface and sat under the lake's central pavilion. Qing Yu's eyes were lowered as she stared into the still water, its calm restored. After a long while, her voice softly sounded. Did you know my mother? Chapter 132. 2. Indiscernible palpitations. She is an elder I greatly respect. Lu Junyao's lips arced up. I have known her for a good 100 years. Hearing that, Qing Yu's expression was a little complicated as she looked at him. You're already a few 100 years old? Although she knew that the lifespan of people in Cloud Heaven was extraordinarily long, but the man before her looked to be only about 20 years old at most. No matter how you look at him, he did not look like a person who had lived for more than 100 years. Lu Junyao's face expressed surprise, and he then said, Cloud Heaven is different from the lower-level realms, and the age its people live up to will naturally be much higher. If I remember it correctly, your mother is already more than 300 years old in you. Speaking up till that point, he then paused, his voice a little grim as he continued. She must have used some special secret technique to prevent you from growing up. Otherwise, you should be at least 50 or 60 years old by now. Qing Yu's eyes grew deep in thought. 50 or 60 years old. But my mother was still around just over a decade ago. According to what Yin Su said, her mother had died from difficulties that occurred during childbirth, and she was now only 14 years old. That didn't really make sense, so what had really happened? That's merely a trick to deceive people's eyes, Lu Junyao said as he shook his head lightly. She has disappeared from Cloud Heaven for almost 100 years already, so how could it only be just over a decade since it happened? In that instant, it was as if a particular taut string suddenly snapped in her mind, feeling like she had forgotten something very important. Under a blood-colored sky, a beautiful red-clothed woman was kneeling on the ground, a pair of children with exquisite looks carried in her arms. Her face could not be seen clearly, but her lips that were tinged with a faint smile as she planted a gentle kiss on the foreheads of the two children. I offer 100 years of my cultivation and flesh body up as sacrifice, to seal my children's memories in dust, to halt their growth, for them to reincarnate and change their lives, reborn into a different world, living their lives in peace and joy, free from worry. Mother's children, forgive Mother for being so cruel, who hope that you will both grow up safely and will never ever remember all these painful matters. I'm sorry. If there is a next life, Mother will come to you to atone for my sins, but in this life, I cannot leave him to be alone on his own. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. Mother loves the both of you. Qing Yu felt a splitting headache in that instant as the images played out in her mind. The scene was clearly one she had never seen before, but it felt so real, like she had experienced it personally before. Seeing her brows furrow up so tightly and cold sweat had formed on her forehead, Lu Junyao pressed one hand against her back and a gentle power slowly flowed into her body that gradually dissipated the pain. Feeling better? Lu Junyao asked with great concern. Qingyu nodded her head, indicating she was fine. Chapter 132. 3. Indiscernible palpitations. Lu Junyao looked at her, and his eyes softened. Leave Aunt Lan's matter to me. Rest assured that you will meet with her one day. It was then that Qingyu came to realize that he had been addressing her mother as Aunt Lan. She could not help but ask him, "What is her name?" "Your mother's surname is the same as yours. She is surnamed Qing, Qing Lan Fei." Qing Lan Fei. So it turns out that her name from before is not real. She has indeed been reincarnated and living a different life with many things that have changed. Qing Yu's gaze glinted, and she then said softly, "Thank you." Lu Junyao was taken aback. Thanks for what? This seemed to be the first time he can remember the little fox ever saying these two words to him. Between them, besides the instance where she had saved his life right in the beginning, and she then got drawn into trouble that almost got her killed while saving him, which evened things out between them, they had made use of each other after that in turns who never called for them to have to use the words, "thank you" at all. This time, it was perhaps only because of Aunt Lan that she had come to soften her stance towards him. Hearing that, Qingyu looked at him seriously and said, "Thank you for being so concerned about my mother. With my current ability, I am not able to resurrect her, but you can. So I am thanking you from the bottom of my heart. I am really not used to seeing you being so courteous," Lu Junyao said with a laugh. This time, Qingyu did not rebut him but went on to say, "No matter what, I still have to thank you. If you need any help in future, as long as it is within my capabilities, I will definitely do everything I can." He had not thought that things would turn out getting such a promise out from her. What an unexpected pleasant surprise. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU, but having come to know that she was indeed Aunt Lan's daughter, the great opinion he had had of her all this time now became even more favorable, even though this little fox was temperamental and blows hot and cold as and when she liked. But it might perhaps be because he had seen too many people who bowed their heads and bent their back before him, trying to win his favor, so this felt rather refreshing to him instead. Of course, he had not really given it much thought, as anyone else who dared to be so disrespectful to him would have already died by 1,000 cuts several hundred times by now. The night grew deeper, and the deep autumn's weather was exceptionally chilly, the cold seeping into one's bones. The young lady was dressed in just a suit of thin white clothes, and her figure was so slender and frail. Moreover, the expression on her face was a little sad at that moment, so she looked just so pitifully helpless. Before he even realized anything was happening, his body was already reacting before anything else. His hand reached up to undo his purple outer robe, and he draped it over the young lady's shoulders. When his eyes came to meet her surprised gaze, he just said with a flinch, "It's cold. Go back and get some rest." Chapter 132. 4. Indiscernible palpitations. Where had Qingyu ever experienced such caring actions from others before? She immediately felt rather awkward, and she reached her hand up to tug at the piece of clothing on her shoulders, about to pull it off and return it to him. "I'm not cold." "Your hands are cold as ice, and you're saying that you're not cold?" Lu Junyao said as he held the back of her hand. His brows creased together, the expression on his face saying, "You're just lying through your teeth." Qingyu was stumped for words. How was she supposed to explain that it was because she had been practicing the burial soul arts since young, and that was why her body was innately cold? Even on a hot and scorching summer's day, her body would still remain cold and chilly like this. She merely sighed. "All right then. Thank you. I'll return the clothes to you another day." Upon saying that, she then pulled the robe tighter around her and turned to walk out of the pavilion, crossing over the wooden bridge as she left. Behind her, Lu Junyao curled up his lips and suddenly called out, "Little fox." Qingyu halted her steps and turned her head to look at him. Being resistant towards this nickname in the beginning, she had slowly grown numb to it and became used to hearing him call her that. Although she felt that she was completely nothing like a wolf at all, it was like they were such sly and crafty creatures after all, so how could she possibly be anything like them? She really didn't know what this strange and eccentric man could be thinking. The moon's rays were clear and brilliant, almost seemingly bright as day, and everything surrounding them could be seen clearly. The young lady's pair of long, alluring eyes had one corner lifted up slightly as they peered at him, so mesmerizing that they could bring ruin upon cities and countries. One would probably not be able to find another pair of eyes as magically enchanting as hers, where just a brief glance at them would make people willing to offer up everything they had. It was said that the pair of demonic violet eyes belonging to the Lord of the Dark Regions was the most terrifying weapon, and no one dared to meet his gaze. But this young lady's alluring eyes that had a clear limpidness in them were, however, more than that, able to unconsciously put one under an intricate and inescapable spell without anyone knowing a thing. She then just looked at him silently, patiently waiting for him to speak, and in that pair of beautiful-looking eyes, it seemed like they were looking at nothing else but him, that flawless and exquisite face under the silvery glow of moonlight dreamily enchanting, tugging at one's heart unconsciously. Lu Junyao cursed under his breath. This little fox is really as skilled in the art of seduction, just like a fox, doing nothing else but just standing there, but making it impossible to ignore that mesmerizing charm she exuded. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. She is already like this when she is still so young. When she fully blossoms after a few more years, it would be impossible for any man to resist her charms. No, maybe not just the men. He still has not forgotten how many girls' hearts the little fox had stolen when she dressed herself up as a man. Qing Yu stared puzzledly at the man's changing and unreadable expressions on his face. What do you want to say? Is it that hard to say it? Finally, Lu Junyao took a deep breath and looked a little helpless as he said, "It's nothing. I just wanted to say that if you encounter any problems in future, do not hesitate to come find me." Chapter 133. 1. Such displays of affection, it seemed as though he had always spared no effort in delivering himself up to her for use, despite the fact that there were times she did not reciprocate his efforts. Thinking about that, he thought it was probably due to Aunt Lon, and that was why he was exceptionally caring about her. Qing Yu's lips curled up, never thinking that he had called out to her just to tell her this. The frown upon her brows immediately eased, which lent a stunning radiance to that already beautiful face. She then replied, "Sure." The tone of her voice was filled with a kind of gentleness he had never heard before. Lu Junyao was stunned into a daze for a split moment. For such a cold and indifferent young lady to turn back and reveal such a sincere smile, that one instant felt so gently warm like he had never felt before, a moment he would never forget. On the one eventful night, it seemed a change was silently occurring. The next day, Qing Bei was about to knock on his sister's room door when he discovered that the door was loosely pulled shut, and its occupant seemed to have gone out. He was a little puzzled as he pushed the door to go inside, and he saw that the room was empty just like he had thought. Oh right, except for the sorrowful-looking ball of coal sitting up upon the soft lounge chair a short distance away, staring into a particular direction diagonally to one side. The large and expressive blue limpid eyes were so sad that it made one's heart wince. Even Qing Bei, who was not one that would quickly succumb to tiny adorable creatures, could not bear to just walk away at that moment, but strode forward to ask in concern, "What's wrong, Meatball? Has she been scolded? That isn't really possible. Sis pampers the little things so much all the time, so how could she bear to scold her?" Meatball heaved out in a long sigh and then looked into the worried-looking youth's eyes before it asked, "Mother, might not love me anymore." Qing Bei was befuddled. "What do you mean?" Meatball closed its eyes in deep sorrow as it stretched a little paw out to point in a particular direction. "I fell asleep last night, and when I woke up, I discovered that Mother was not around, so I thought I should go out to look for her. But Mother came back after a while, and she brought this back." Qing Bei was still feeling rather puzzled as he turned his head to look in the direction the paw was pointed into. That one look then made him freeze in his spot. On the sideboard over there was a neatly folded purple-colored robe, its material exceptionally exquisite and luxurious, and it could be seen from just one look that it was highly expensive, not something that any ordinary person would be able to afford to wear. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. But that was not the most important point. What's important was that it was men's clothing. Meatball saw him freeze in his spot, and it seemed to find itself at that moment as it went on to complain. Do you think that mother has another man outside and that is why she sneaked herself out in the middle of the night to secretly meet with him? I saw that she was in such a good mood when she came back. Meatball's mouth immediately shriveled up, and it looked like it was going to cry. Meatball only wants mother and does not want a father. He will snatch mother away from me. Qingbei did not know what to say. It's just a piece of clothing, and the little beast was able to dream up such a ludicrous thing. Chapter 133. 2. Such displays of affection. But that piece of clothing did look rather familiar, though. Here he was trying to comfort the overly imaginative and exasperating little thing when Qing Yu's voice sounded at the door outside. What are the two of you up to? She was carrying an exquisite-looking lunchbox, and it looked like it was filled with all kinds of delicious food from the wholesome meal house inside. Where did you go, sis? Qingbei asked as he looked at the beast who was tugging at his sleeve persistently as it wiped at the non-existent tears on its face. He then gave a helpless laugh and continued to say, I saw this little fella looking so pitifully sad and sorrowful when I came here and I thought that you scolded her. Qing Yu raised up an eyebrow and then turned to look at that tiny, highly aggrieved little beast. Didn't you say that you smelled something that moved your heart the last time? It's the Wholesome Meal House's latest product, guaranteed to make one fall in love with it at first bite. Their swallow prawn cake. I went out to buy it for you before daybreak, and here you were feeling so aggrieved. Upon hearing that there was delicious food for it to eat, the little beast's eyes brightened but still looked a little depressed. Qing Yu was then slightly distressed. What happened to her? She would have immediately pounced upon hearing there was food, but she was holding back and not moving at all today? Qingbei's lips stiffened and he pointed with his chin as he said, She saw that piece of clothing over there and has been depressed till now, saying that you have a man outside and does not love her anymore. Qing Yu then glanced in speechlessness at the brocade robe. She had not had time to keep away. It was quite helplessly tiring to have such a drama queen as a beloved pet at times. Qing Yu then looked at the aggrieved-looking little beast with an unreadable smile and said, I will count to 3, and if you do not come over to eat, I will then throw it all to the dogs in the backyard. 1, 2. She had just counted to 2 when the little beast then leapt over in a flying pounce to snatch the lunchbox away, its face wary as it stared straight at her with its large eyes. This is Meatballs. It is not for the dogs. Qing Yu was so tickled by the little beast's antics that she almost broke the facade she had put up to burst out in laughter, but she managed to maintain the cool and indifferent look. Take it outside and eat. Mother has something I need to discuss with your uncle. ORH. The little ball of coal answered and then went toddling outside as it turned its head to look back every few steps it took. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. Qingbei could not help it but burst out laughing. After laughing it all out, he had not forgotten to ask about the more important stuff. Does the robe belong to that man in the gathered cloud loft? From what he could remember, there was only that man who had usually worn purple and was on slightly closer terms to her. It does. Qing Yu nodded, and then considered the matter for a while before she decided to tell him about last night's events. After all, the two of them were twins, and there wasn't anything much that she would be able to hide from him for long. After she told him everything that happened, just as she had expected, Qingbei fell into a daze for a long while. Perhaps he was not able to digest the news that had come so suddenly. Qing Yu was in no hurry, and she waited patiently for him to be able to react. Chapter 133. 3. Such displays of affection after a long while. The youth's slightly hoarse-sounding voice then came out from his mouth. Is our mother really still alive? Qing Yu nodded and said softly to him, She is still alive, but the journey towards having her come awake might be a long and arduous one. That does not matter at all. As long as she is still alive, anything is still possible. Qingbei exclaimed with his fists clenched, his voice resolute and determined. At least she has not really abandoned us, right? The youth's gaze was a little fervent as he looked at her, like he was very eager to hear her answer. All this while, he had always pined for kinship with an almost mad fervor. Even when he knew that Yen Su was not his biological father all this time, he had wished so hard to gain any little bit of his attention, making himself so petty and small, though he was such a proud person deep inside his bones. But he just did not want to accept defeat. Qingyu gave a long sigh, and she brushed her fingers gently over his face as she said gently, "Of course it doesn't. Our mother is the best, and no matter what the reason was that she had to leave us, there is one thing we must not forget. She has always missed us." Those words somehow comforted Qing Bei's heart that was filled with frustration and much unease, and his handsome face showed a joyful smile. "I believe it. I have always believed that." To have unexpectedly gained news about their mother just before they were going to join the Faint Mist sect, it was undoubtedly something to be happy about for them. But, with their mother's spirit soul split and scattered over different places, how hard would it be to gather her soul together and have her resurrected? But all those worries was something she did not share with Qing Bei. A month's time was not that long, nor was it all that short as well, but time was still passing a day at a time. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. The leaves on the trees turned yellow and gradually fell, except for those plants that did not fear the bitter cold and continued to bloom throughout the 4 seasons in a year. Greenery grew less and less, turning the place to look desolate and lonely. It was not so bad in places where it was warmer, for the kingdom on the water's edge that was surrounded by the sea on all 4 sides, it was pure ice and snow. Icy snow could be seen piled up everywhere, unmelting throughout the year. Every time winter came, the congealed snow on the mountains would only melt in the subsequent year's summer, so it could be seen just how bitterly cold and unforgiving the weather in the water's edge kingdom was. With such chilly and frozen weather, the water's edge people really wished they could just snuggle up inside their blankets till the season has passed. A lone, desolate figure was standing quietly outside the Limitless Sect's doors, tall and well-built. When everyone else were wrapped up in thick and heavy winter clothes, he was dressed only in one single layer, an ink-colored brocade robe, alone and solemn. Snowflakes floated down in thick flurries, falling onto his silver hair, and the figure quickly disappeared from sight in a blink. The ink-colored robe was gradually covered by the flurries of snow, and it was soon impossible to even see its color. That person did not move at all, and it was not known how long he had been standing in the snow, his entire body almost blending in completely together with the snow. Chapter 133. 4. Such displays of affection when Ajin came out from the palace. What met his eyes was that very scene. Dawn was just breaking over the horizon at that moment as daybreak came late in winter, but he still woke up as early as before, not expecting to see that. It was not known when that man had already woken up, and judging from the thick layer of snow on his clothes, it would at least have been 4 hours ago. Although who practiced cultivation possessed spirit energy to protect their bodies and were not afraid of the cold, but the weather in Water's Edge was not just ordinarily cold. Its temperature many tens of times lower than the winters of most other regions. He was after all a mortal born with a flesh body, so how could he possibly be able to withstand nature's calamity like this? Ajin heaved a long sigh and went to fetch an umbrella from inside. He opened it up and then went walking outside. Shielding him from the flurrying snow, Ajin then said, "My lord, it's cold out here. You should go inside." This man had always showed scant care for his own body like this all the time. Especially when he was in a bad mood, he would always like to do something highly extreme like this to cool himself down and to clear his mind. However, Ajin would very much rather he be like what people outside said he was. A brutal and bloodthirsty murderer who killed without batting an eye. As when he was like that, he would at least be able to vent out everything he held suppressed inside, and not let it pile up inside his heart day after day, where he would then grow to become more depressed and grim. Qing Yili felt his thoughts being dragged back from a faraway, distant place, and his dark green eyes were half-narrowed. His eyelashes that were longer and lusher than a woman's were covered in a layer of frost because they had not moved for a long period of time, and when he blinked, tiny specks of snowy glitter fell from his eyes. He raised his eyes up to gaze far into the horizon, like he was seeing a certain place or a particular person there. Winters come so soon. The cold and clear magnetic voice sounded out softly. Ajin was taken aback, and he then said with a laugh, "My lord, you are in the Water's Edge Kingdom, and this is already your 14th year here. Haven't you gotten used to the early winters that come to the water's edge? Under the cover of the mask, his expression could not be seen, but just his voice could be heard. So 14 years have passed. So he had muddled through so many years in what felt to be just a blink of an eye. He had once thought to live through this dull and insipid life just like that till the day he dies, never having once thought that the heavens would actually still care about him. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. Qing Yi Li's gaze suddenly softened. He then said, Jean, tidy up everything there is to deal with here in this place quickly. I want to return to her side as soon as I can. Jean naturally knew who Qing Yili was talking about. The portrait that had been carefully kept for so many years, one that other people were not allowed to even take a single glance at, the one person whom the man kept right at the tip of his heart. He could still remember just before they left, when the man had held the young lady in his arms, his eyes had quietly turned red at the rims. The man who had always been cold and heartless, one who did not care about anything before his eyes, had seemed to give all his warmth and feelings onto just this one person. It was a look no one had never seen before, a highly moving scene. Chapter 134. 1. It likes the roasted rabbit I make in a blink. The day of the recruitment trials for the 3 great sects was nearing. The moment one stepped out through the doors, they would be able to see clear changes on the streets, where people of the pugilist world from all kinds of sects and clans could be seen. The usually peaceful imperial capital was also bustling with activity. Business at the tea house in front of the gathered cloud loft had always been dismal, but as the weather turned cold, it was now bursting with customers every day in the recent period as all the pugilist warriors who had been on the roads and come in from long journeys needed a place to rest their feet and enjoy a hot cup of tea to warm their bodies and to catch up on the recent major events that happened in the world. In one of the rooms, several people were seated around a table, and one of them said in a mysterious tone, "Did you guys hear? Something big happened in the Faint Mist sect." "What big thing happened?" the others asked curiously. The man gazed around him and then said in a whisper, "I have a cousin who was a disciple of the Faint Mist sect before." The several other people then went tisk in chorus as they rolled their eyes in contempt. "You call that something big? What's so astounding about that?" "At least let me finish first. My cousin was one of the inner circle disciples among the top 100, holding the 50th rank." The man continued to say in exasperation, "But do you all know? He was considered to be rather respected in the sect and had not returned for 3 whole years already. But just a few days ago, he suddenly came back and he said." "What did he say? Tell us quick." Just as he got to the most important part, the man suddenly stopped. He was really asking for a beating, keeping them all on tenterhooks. The man turned his eyes to gaze at everyone and then said, "He said that he has been thrown out by the sect." Hearing that, the several people there were greatly shocked. For a person to be ranked among the top 50 should rightfully possess significant powers. So why would they be driven out? Could the Faint Mist sect have something big up their sleeves? "And I heard from my cousin that the total number of disciples in the Faint Mist sect added up together now, including the ones who have not returned from their journeys, comes up to less than 300 people. The several people became even more shocked. Why have their numbers decreased by so much in such a short period of time? I remember that the Faint Mist sect has the greatest numbers among the 3 great sects, and they should at least have 600 or 700 people. They've decreased their numbers by more than half in one single stroke? What could the Faint Mist sect have up their sleeves? I heard that most of them who were driven out were disciples who did not meet the mark, and the top 5 ranking experts had returned to the Faint Mist sect to hold the fort. I think that the admission trials for this year's recruitment will definitely be very hard. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. Even your cousin who was in the top 50 ranks is deemed inadequate, much less any of us here. I think we'll not be able to even make it past the first round." A man said mournfully, "Isn't that so true? Who doesn't know how ridiculously powerful the Faint Mist sect's top 5 are? I heard that they want to recruit 50 people this time round, but I think they would be lucky to even get 20. If the Faint Mist sect's recruitment trials are going to be so difficult, I think we had better go to the Limitless sect or the Carefree Valley instead. We'll stand a better chance." Chapter 134. 2. It likes the roasted rabbit I make. You do not seem to be surprised in the slightest, Bai Jiyin said with interest as he looked at the young lady before him. Qingyu held a teacup in her hand as she listened intently to the conversation of the people downstairs, her face highly unimpressed. Having heard Bai Jiyin, she then turned her gaze onto him and replied, "There's nothing surprising about that. Winners stay and losers leave. Perfectly normal." Bai Jiyin raised an eyebrow and then leaned in a little closer. "Are you really going to the Faint Mist sect? Do you have a particular motive?" He would obviously not think that the lass was going there purely out of boredom and was just seeking fun. Moreover, with the powers she possessed, she would not be able to learn anything in there. That just left one reason. There was something in there that she was interested in. Qingyu looked at the handsome-looking face leaning in that was filled with curiosity. She just curved up the corner of lips and said indifferently to that face filled with anticipation, "Heaven's secrets must not be revealed." Bai Jiyin gave her a pleading look. "We're already on such familiar terms. What reason is there to hide?" How disappointing. Especially after he got to know from Lu Junyao that she was Aunt Lan's child. Their relationship had been drawn closer together and the lass attitude towards them had improved tremendously, but just this trait of liking to keep people in suspense that wasn't all that adorable. "I heard that the Faint Mist sect is very strict. Once you go in there, I don't know how many years it will be before we'll be able to meet again," Bai Jiyin said sadly, and there was even a tinge of reluctance in his voice. Hearing that, a corner of Qing Yu's mouth twitched and she looked at him speechlessly. It wasn't as if she would not be able to come out at all, and here he was saying it like they would soon be parted in death. He is really just as dramatic as that little ball of fur she had back home. Qing Yu then pushed the cup in her hand towards him, interrupting his sorrowful and depressing thoughts. "Poor T. Are you ordering me around like a waiter now?" Bai Jiyin said with a laugh despite himself. Really don't know from who she had picked up this personality trait from, like she was born with a silver spoon waiting to be served. Really cast from the exact same mold as that fellow Lu Junyao. But having come to know her identity, Bai Jiyin was a little more willing to indulge her, the way a senior would care for a junior. "Tisk, little lass. Don't you know well enough to wear a little more when the weather turns cold? Your hands are like ice cubes." Bai Jiyin had accidentally brushed her fingers when he took the cup from her, and he was surprised by the biting chill he had felt. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. He immediately raised an eyebrow and started to admonish sternly. "You might still be a young little lady, but do not just care about looking good all the time. You are dressed so thinly, and if you come to spoil your body's constitution from the cold, you will surely regret it in the future." Qingyu was at a loss for words. He's acting so much like a benevolent father showing concern for his daughter. With that thought in mind, she just blurted out, "Bai Jiyin, you will surely make a great father in future." "Har? Great father?" Bai Jiyin was befuddled, his mind suddenly blank, unable to react to her words. Chapter 134. 3. It likes the roasted rabbit I make. Qingyu pressed her lips together and smiled. She was just about to say something when someone came up from behind and stuffed something round into her arms. It was warm to the touch, but not scalding, its temperature just right. Her eyes blinked in surprise as she raised her head to look up. What met her eyes was a perfectly chiseled jaw, its skin clear and flawless. Seeing her raise her head, his lips curved up slightly to reveal a faint smile. "Knowing that she's cold, if you have time to be gabbing so much nonsense, didn't you think to grab a warmer instead?" Lu Junyao said without any expression on his face as he sat down on the other side of the table. "Oh?" Bai Jiyin just stared at him, unable to speak. Did he just imagine seeing that man smile faintly and acting so gentle? Why has his face immediately turned so cold and heartless the very next instant? Although the weather is getting colder, winter isn't here yet. Who would use a warmer now? Bai Jiyin sputtered to say, his face crying tearlessly. The man just looked at him expressionlessly, the mesmerizing violet eyes tinged with a glint of displeasure, which quickly shut him up in terror. All right, you're the great lord. So anything you say has to be right. Next time I'll definitely keep a sharp lookout for that, all right? Sheesh. You were already so protective in the past, and now you've gone from bad to worse that you're shielding her so unreasonably. Qingyu lowered her eyes to look at the small and intricate little warmer in her arms, not knowing what was inside. But there was a faint fragrance, a highly comforting scent. The corners of her mouth unconsciously lifted, and she said a soft word of thanks to him. The faint Miss Sex recruitment trials is 3 days away? Lu Junyao asked. Qingyu nodded. Yes. As the journey there is rather long, I will be setting off tomorrow. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. Lu Junyao acknowledged with a nod, and then turned to Bai Jiyan to say, transform the lightning blaze unicorn back tomorrow. Hearing that, Bai Jiyan was startled a moment, and it was a good while before he was able to react. From the moment they came back from Hades Canyon, the unfortunate beast was shrunk back into its original basic form by Lu Junyao. From its magnificent and valiant massive size, it was shrunk to become as big as a kitten, its looks ambiguous and of undeterminable species, a laughable sight. It had lived among the common cats and dogs for the past few months, but as it was too ugly looking, it was ostracized by all the other animals, with none of them willing to play with it, greatly despising its repulsive looks. This caused the great and resplendent 12th level high-grade spirit beast to be greatly humiliated, but was helpless as its spirit powers were sealed up when it was shrunk. It was damningly unable to overpower even a useless stray, living a pitiful beastly life. To think that the pathetic beast that had been dumped in some unknown corner waiting for mushrooms to grow had actually not been entirely forgotten by its owner. Chapter 134. 4. It likes the roasted rabbit I make. Bai Jiyan felt that the fellow was really unlucky, and his face was sympathetic as he shook his head sadly. Transform it back and then? Lu Junyao's gaze did not waver and his tone was calm as he said, let the lightning blaze unicorn pull the horse carriage and send little fox to the faint mist sect tomorrow. Bai Jiyan had not yet swallowed his mouthful of tea, and he immediately choked when he heard that, coughing till his handsome-looking face was red. It was a good while later before he was able to recover and say, why do you want to make the lightning blaze unicorn pull the carriage? That fella is so haughty it will never be willing to. Lu Junyao raised an eyebrow slightly, and his alluring pair of violet eyes glinted beautifully with a light. You just go tell it their death is not the most terrifying thing in this world. It will be more terrifying when a level 12 high-grade spirit beast comes to find itself being eaten up by a lowly stray cat. Bai Jiyan could only silently light a candle in his heart for a particular beast for its beastly, pitiful life. This is one truly venomous man. But at the same time, he came to really see just how much Lu Junyao valued Qingyu. The lightning blaze unicorn had merely accidentally injured her back then, and it was made to suffer such a cruel punishment. The man must really respect this elder of his a lot, and that is why he is so concerned for her child. But he would probably also do the same as well. Who asked the last to possess such extraordinary skills in both medicine and martial arts? Even the little tantrums she threw occasionally was so adorable. She was just so marvelous. And just looking at that exquisitely beautiful face, who could really get angry at her? Looking at Bai Jiyan's face that was at such a loss, Qingyu then opened her mouth to say, no need to trouble yourself. I'll just take the regular horse carriage. The lightning blaze unicorn is a high-grade spirit beast and has its own mind and consciousness. Such types of beasts are hard to tame as they have extremely proud hearts. Doing this to it will be just too humiliating. Lu Junyao laughed softly. You do not need to worry it will feel humiliated. If it was anyone else, that creature will surely throw a fit. But if it's you, it will be most happy to do it. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. Qingyu was taken aback by surprise. Why? That time back in Hades Valley, when it lost control of itself and went out on a mindless massacre, it still did not strike you directly. Even when you fell off the cliff at the end, it had even wanted to leap down to go save you. Lu Junyao himself found it rather incredulous when he spoke about that, and he shook his head with a smile. Although I do not know the real reason, but it really likes you. Hence, even when he punished the spirit beast severely when they came back, and the beast had felt angry and highly aggrieved, it still knew that it had done something wrong, so it merely endured it all silently. Qingyu was silent as she heard him finish. She thought about it very seriously for a while, and then lifted her eyes to say, "Maybe. It just likes the roast rabbits I make." Lu Junyao was speechless. Chapter 135. 1. Narcissism. Needs to be treated the next day. Outside the Duke of Eternal Peace Manor, the two royal concubines were holding their daughters' hands, reluctantly bidding them goodbye. They even secretly stuffed quite a significant amount of money from their own secret stashes, afraid that they would be bullied by others in the faint mist sect where there was no one to look after them. On the other side, Yin Su merely reminded the twins, Qing Yu and Qing Bei, to give it their all, and to help each other out together with Yin Ning Luo after they get in, for them to become closer to each other. He told them that Yin Ning Luo had been inside for quite a number of years already anyway, and would have established relations, so she would be able to take care of them a little as well. Qing Yu merely smiled without saying a word, while Qing Bei went on to acknowledge, to make it a little less awkward for Yin Su. Because there were 4 of them altogether, Yin Su had specially arranged for the widest and most comfortable horse carriage in the manor for them, to bring to the faint mist sect. But just as he was about to get someone to drive the carriage out, she suddenly heard the sound going clippity-clop coming in from a distance away. Everyone could not help themselves but crane their necks out to look. What they saw immediately caused their eyes to bulge. They saw a horse carriage being slowly driven round a bend. The body of the entire black carriage car incredibly sleek, simple, and luxurious. Tassels embroidered with threads of gold trimmed the sides of the roof, which was a really nice touch. But what was most surprising was that the horse right at the front looked really special, although its body was no different from any other horse. But they just could not help but feel that something seemed a little off. The horse carriage came to a stop slowly in front of them. The driver was a handsome and rather good-natured looking man. Qing Yu then came to recall that it was the man who had been standing at the doors and was sleeping with his eyes wide open when she went to the gathered cloud loft on one occasion. Seeing that, Yin Su took a couple of steps forward and opened his mouth to ask, "And this gentleman is?" The man smiled, but his gaze was looking at the young lady behind Yin Su. "By the orders of my lord, I came here to escort Miss Qing Yu to the faint mist sect." The moment those words came out, several pairs of eyes immediately turned to fix upon Qing Yu, to looking at her measuringly. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU standing at the side. Qing Yu lifted an eyebrow and her eyes were fixed upon the strange-looking full jet black horse with a bright sleek coat. It was trampling its hooves impatiently in spot, snorting loudly through its nostrils, like it had nowhere to vent its frustrations and was feeling highly aggrieved. That guy Lu Junyao really has turned it into a horse to pull the carriage. I wonder who might be your lord? Yin Su was still a little worried. Although he did not know what kind of an acquaintance Qing Yu might have come to make outside, but just by looking at the man driving the carriage and the subtly muted luxury of the highly expensive carriage that seemed to be more than what it looked like on the surface, he knew that the person must possess an extraordinary background. Though the last did indeed possess some great capabilities, but she was after all still very young, and would fall for the deceit of people with impure intentions. The coachman was just able to say something when Qing Yu interrupted by voicing out, "It's a friend of mine and father does not have to worry about it. This friend of mine is someone trustworthy and moreover." Chapter 135. 2. Narcissism. Needs to be treated. Her gaze fixed upon the strange horse, she contemplated for a while on the approach to take before she slowly opened her mouth to say, "The steed is actually a spirit beast and its legs takes it over long distances very quickly, several times the speed of ordinary horses. It is also vert steady, and I think my 2 elder sisters will not be able to tolerate a bumpy ride filled with too many jolts, so let us just take this carriage instead." The moment they heard that the carriage would not jolt, Yin Shiwu was already subconsciously nodding her head in agreement. "That's right, father. We'll just take this carriage. Since it's a friend Qing Yu's, our dear little sister, everything will be fine." Beside her, Yin Shiro also quipped softly in agreement. Hearing that, what else could he possibly say? He could only look at Qing Yu thoughtfully as he weighed the situation and then reminded them of a few things before he let them leave. The few of them climbed up into the carriage, but Qing Yu did not move. standing right in front of the horse carriage as she looked at the unfortunate beast looking extremely grumpy. She then reached her hand out suddenly and stroked the beast's head as she said in a gentle voice, "This must be so hard on you." The eyes of the man driving the coach almost popped out of his head as he stared. This little young miss is such a bold one. She dares to go touch a lightning blaze unicorn? It must be known that the horn on its head was the strongest weapon throughout the beast's body, so their heads must never ever be touched. That spot was an absolute taboo for anyone except for its owner, and whoever else touches it would definitely be killed. The man broke out in a bout of cold sweat from fright, and he was already thinking in his mind whether he should go back to fetch help, as he would not be able to control an enraged lightning blaze unicorn like this with his own power alone. Moreover, he had heard that this young miss was highly valued by the Lord, so if she should come to meet with any harm, wouldn't his head be made to shift house? But who would have thought? That fellow was unexpectedly calm and did not make a single sound, but just stared with its beastly eyes flared wide and its face in shock at the young lady before it. Qingyu laughed and stretched her hand out to stroke its head once more. "Although I tried my best to refuse, but your lord's mind was set, and he was just too stubborn. So, in order to make it up to you, why not I roast a rabbit for you next time? And I'll throw in a chicken as well?" Read latest chapters at Audiobook. Almost the same moment that she had just finished her words, the pair of beastly eyes then blinked happily, and then blinked at her again, before it obediently nudged its head against the young lady's palm, docile and tame. The man driving the coach was nearly blinded by that sight. Goodness, was the person he saw just earlier who accidentally touched the lightning blaze unicorn's body and then died a violent death when the beast drove its horn right through the man's body, just an hallucination? After having appeased the lightning blaze unicorn, Qingyu then climbed herself up into the carriage. She had just pulled the curtain aside to step inside when she froze in her spot. Chapter 135. 3. Narcissism needs to be treated. She saw that the insides of the carriage had a thick layer of snowy white covering spread over the floor, seeming to be the fur of some kind of spirit beast, so even if one were to fall, it would not hurt. Placed right in the middle was an ornate little low table, with tea and several dishes of snacks. In a corner at the foot of the table, there was also a small, intricate little warmer. Qingyu's eyes glinted sharply, and the voice of the man driving the coach suddenly came in. "Miss Qingyu, my lord said that you should keep the warmer by your side, and when it isn't warm anymore, you just have to add some fire spirit grass for it to work. There's a small box under the table, and you'll find some of that inside." Hearing that, she then saw that there was indeed a small square box under the table. Actually, there was some warmth in the carriage itself, and it was not cold at all, but it was just that Qingyu's body was always cold and at such a low temperature. Hence, even if it was warm in there, she did not feel it at all, as she had become so used to it, not feeling cold at all. But it was after all done with good intentions. Qingyu carried the warmer in her hands and then said softly, "Can I trouble you to convey my thanks to your lord when you go back?" The man outside the carriage said in a bright voice with a smile, "The young miss need not be so courteous. My lord owes you for having saved his life, and all these does not require much effort at all. So it's nothing worth mentioning." And Qingyu did not respond any further to that. But Yin Shiwu, who was seated right beside her, shuffled over to her and asked in very softly, "Is this from that man from the gathered cloud loft?" Although she wasn't really sure, but she just had a feeling it was him in her heart. Back at the Hades Valley, she had seen just how attentive that man had been towards Qingyu. Although she had initially been highly jealous, she was now just filled with envy. Qingyu raised an eyebrow, but wasn't surprised that she was able to guess it correctly, but just replied to her with a simple yes. Yin Shiwu's expression showed a triumphant, "Just as I thought," but her heart felt a sense of sourness that came out of nowhere. Her mind was filled with thoughts of the man whose looks were so good-looking that he might be immortal and was too deep and profound to decipher, who viewed the entire world to be beneath him. How could he not even give her a single glance, but was so friendly and amicable to Qingyu, showing her the utmost care and concern? She pursed up her lips and then turned to Qingyu to ask, "Have you come to like that man?" Read latest chapters at Audiobook. Yu Qingyu's gaze sharpened, and the expression on her face was baffled. What? Yin Shiwu assumed that she just wasn't ready to admit it. Even if you have not, that man definitely likes you. Qingyu did not say a word, but just looked at her silently. Yin Shiwu then became even more depressed as her slim fingers caressed her own face. I am clearly also so beautiful as well, but he did not even glance at me once. And then looking at you here. Yin Shiwu was just about to pick on any shortcomings, but when she saw that absolutely flawless and perfect-looking face, she fell silent, finding herself at a loss for words. After a while, she then said, "Besides just that face, your temperament is not as soft and enchanting as mine, and you know nothing about needlework, music, and chess, skills a respectable fair lady must possess. So why had he come to have taken a liking to you?" Chapter 135. 4. Narcissism. Needs to be treated. Qingyu was speechless. Narcissism is an illness. Needs to be treated. The horse carriage drawn by a high-grade spirit beast was just amazing. Not only did they feel the least bit of queasiness, even when they were traveling over bumpy and uneven mountain roads, it felt as if they were on flat ground, the entire journey peaceful and uneventful. The journey to the faint mist sect was far and distant, and it required at least a day's time, even by fast horses. But although it was clear to see that the lightning blaze unicorn clearly had not traveled at a very fast speed, they had somehow come to reach the foot of the mountain to go into the faint mist sect in less than a day. Quite a good amount of people have come to gather at the place in succession, as an appointed disciple from the faint mist sect would come to lead the way when the time came, to settle them into an inn at the foot of the mountain for the time being. They would wait till it was time for the trials before they would be allowed inside the sect. Hence, even if these people have arrived an entire day earlier, they would not be able to enter yet. There was a rather large inn at the foot of the mountain, and it had no problems accommodating a few hundred people. The only thing that was not good about it was that the condition of the inn wasn't exactly in good shape, being located in the wilderness. The furniture and beds looked extremely simple and crude, and the food served was bland and tasteless. The young youths who were so used to splendid clothes and luxurious food were naturally unable to put up with such poor and dilapidated conditions, immediately breaking out in complaint. "Tisk, are all you brats here to sightsee and leisure? There is only this one single inn of mine within a 100-mile radius of the faint mist sect. You can jolly well choose not to stay. Just leave and I will not be seeing you off." From the back of the main hall, a woman about 30 years of age dressed in plain and simple clothes said, her face clean and free from any rouge or powder. She seemed to be a gentle and harmless woman, but just for a pair of sharp and intelligent eyes. She cast her gaze out of the corner of her eyes scathingly as she looked upon the crowd outside the inn, and then curled up a corner of her mouth in a meaning smile before she said, "Don't complain that I did not remind you. There is nothing else here at night, but just a good number of hungry wolves and ferocious large cats. You can still make it if you leave now, otherwise when it turns dark, who knows what will happen?" She said that with an evil smile on her lips and did not speak another word after that. The next second, all the youths who had been complaining with utter contempt and disdain suddenly all surged themselves forward in a rush, fighting to be ahead of the others as they hollered, "Proprietor, I'll be staying. Give me your best room. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World." They were after all mostly still inexperienced young teens who had not seen much of the world, hence they were still fearful of such unknown dangers. Of course there were also those stubborn ones who still did not come in and even said with derisive scorn, making up such tall tales, "There are really no lack of black-hearted people who thrive on earning money through such evil means everywhere." Those words were not said in a soft voice, and the woman had naturally heard him. She merely laughed it off casually and did not offer a rebuttal to that. Qingyu watched the scene quietly from the side and then arched up an eyebrow before making her way inside. A slender hand was suddenly placed onto the counter right before the woman, leaving a small green crystal stone the size of a bird's egg. "Give me the quietest room you have for 4 people." Chapter 136. 1. Frankly expressed goodwill. The voice was clear and pronounced, tinged with an innate aloofness and noble. The woman was taken aback a moment, and she then raised her eyes up to see an exquisite and flawlessly beautiful young lady with the edges of her mouth slightly curved up. Her long, upswept phoenix-like eyes had a hint of a smile in them, neither too passionate nor cold. In that chilly weather, she was dressed only in thin white clothes, extremely eye-catching among the crowd, especially her highly outstanding looks. The woman then looked at the clear, bright-colored crystal on the countertop, and her eyes narrowed. If she was not mistaken, that was the crystal core of a level 6 spirit beast at the very least, which would fetch a high price of some tens of millions in the black market, enough to buy several inns that was bigger than this one she had. She thought that maybe the young lady did not know the value of the gem and had ignorantly just taken out such a precious treasure. Although she loved money quite a lot, but she would never want to cheat ignorant young ladies like this. She went on to push the crystal gem back with a stern expression, although feeling a little reluctant, but she held on to her principles. "Little missy, this is worth too much and I do not have any crystal gems of sufficient value to give back as change, and neither do I have enough cash on hand." Qingyu was a little surprised. She had thought that the money-loving proprietress would have accepted it, never expecting that she would take the moral stand, and the smile on her face immediately deepened slightly. The proprietress must accept it. It is affinity that we've come to meet, and let's just take it as a token of our newfound friendship. The woman was startled for a moment. The young lady looked like she was a pampered and sheltered young miss from a rich family, and she had not thought that the young lady would know how to deal with people so well, and had such a generous hand. She had always liked people like this. With that thought in her mind, the woman then smiled and said, "In that case, I will accept it. I have never been a wishy-washy person. Besides me, there are 4 other waiters in this inn. My name is Qiao Wei, and you can call me Sister Wei." Qingyu nodded with a smile, and then called her Sister Wei. Qiao Wei's eyes curved into 2 crescents, and her lips turned up into a smile. Although she did not possess an exactly stunning or particularly unforgettable countenance, she was still highly good-looking when she smiled, a look that cheered people's hearts to see. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. Money Leopard. Bring this young lady here to our best room and make sure to serve them well." As Qiao Wei's voice fell, a tall, thin man came walking over. His long, thin face was all smiles as he said eagerly, "Will the young missy please follow me?" Qingyu nodded slightly. Seeing that, Qing Bei, Yin Shiwu and Yin Shiro beside her immediately turned to follow them upstairs. It was not till the few of them have disappeared from sight that the other people in the inn snapped back to their senses, one of them shouting out in rage, "Innkeeper, I was clearly the first to ask for your best room. Why did you give it to someone else? Don't you know what is first come, first served?" The ear-deafening roar was tinged with a slight measure of oppressive spirit power, and quite a number of them felt woozy from the reverberating voice. Chapter 136. 2. Frankly expressed goodwill. The weak and frail-looking woman seated at the back of the hall dug at her ear lazily, her eyes gazing indifferently at the tall and burly youth with a fiery temperament. It was just a casual and indifferent glance, and the youth who had been in such a rage suddenly went quiet, his body subconsciously retreating back a step. The woman's eyes are just too terrifying. Qiao Wei smiled without mirth as she curled up the edges of her lips and said, "This woman calls the shots here in this place, and this woman can jolly well decide who she wants to let the rooms out to. Didn't you see how courteous that little young lady was? This woman finds her highly pleasing to the eye. As for the rest of you here, this woman is now unhappy with all of you, and you can all now either choose to leave or to pay twice the price to stay here. You are free to do as you please." You are just too much. This is supposed to be accommodation the Faint Mist sect has arranged for us, and not only are you chasing us out here, you are asking for 2 times the price as payment. Aren't you afraid that the Faint Mist sect will come down hard on you?" Someone shouted loudly in indignance. Qiao Wei blinked her eyes innocently like she had just heard a joke. "Come down hard on me? We'll see who in the Faint Mist sect will dare to?" Those taunting words thrown out in challenge immediately rendered all the youth speechless, but there was nothing they could do about it. They really wanted to lash out to teach this audacious woman a good lesson, but not to mention the fact that the woman's cultivation was too profound to be read. The man standing beside her was tall and muscular, looking like an immovable tower. Just by standing there without moving, he was intimidating enough to make all of them not dare to take a single step forward, looking every inch a person not to be trifled with. If they were not careful, they might very well stumble into a steel wall and stand to lose more than there was to gain. They could not afford to stir up trouble here, or they can forget about taking part in the faint Miss recruitment trials. There was nothing they could do but to bear the pain of paying twice the amount of money to stay at the inn. Qingyu watched the entire farce with amusement and then returned back to her room. Although it was said that the conditions in the inn was crude, but it was not really entirely unbearable. The beds were hardwood boards, and Yin Shiwu and Yin Shiro, who were so used to sleeping on soft mattresses and fluffy blankets, could not help but to find it a little hard to get used to. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU, but fortunately for them, after the experience they had in Hell's Canyon and the recent months of training they underwent, they were able to bear up better under the hardship. They were only going to stay in here for 2 nights, and it would be over before they knew it. Qingyu, regarding the proprietress. After a little bit of packing in the room, Yin Shiro sat by the bed and suddenly asked. She had always been a little more meticulous in thought, and she had naturally noticed that Qingyu had intentionally befriended that woman. Although she could not say that she understood Qingyu very well, but she knew that the young lady was warm only on the surface and was cold inside, an aloof person deep in her bones and also haughty and arrogant. Hence, there must be a reason for her actions. Yin Shiwu, on the other hand, was carefree and happy-go-lucky, so she had not given it any thought at all. The fact that the inn was situated in such a desolate and remote place just made one wonder how the place was able to survive. Moreover, besides the lady innkeeper herself, there were only 4 other waiters, so if they were to encounter any robbers, it could be said that they were completely defenseless, much less mention how they could possibly continue to run a business to earn money here. Chapter 136. 3. Frankly expressed goodwill among those few people. Not a single one of them was as simple as they looked. Hearing that, Qingyu only looked at the others to say, Anyway, it is almost nightfall and all of you better keep an eye out at night. Do not sleep too deeply. Her words were a little baffling, but they have all grown used to trusting her, and they did not probe any further. They just quietly kept an eye open when they slept, not even removing their outer robes. Night was approaching, and the weather in that deep autumn was extremely cold, especially in that inn nestled among the mountains. It was so cold no one was able to sleep soundly, and it did not help even when they hid themselves under the thick cover of their blankets. It only warmed up slightly when they summoned up a bit of their spirit powers, and with the moonlight streaming in from outside the window, they could see that a thin layer of frost had formed. Yin Shiwu did not eat that night as dinner was just a couple of coarse plain buns and several unappetizing dishes. She had lost her appetite just by looking at them and had buried her head under the blanket to go to sleep. But now, she had been awakened by a shiver from the cold and felt her tummy drumming up a symphony of emptiness. Feeling so hungry, she was no able to sleep at all. She was regretting it now and thought that she should have at least eaten something at least for dinner. But even if she wanted a plain bun now, they would be too hard to even bite into. Qingyu was not sleeping as she sat cross-legged in bed. Hearing the soft groans and sighs raised in complaint from Yin Shiwu, she opened her eyes and said softly, What's wrong? Yin Shiwu had not thought that Qingyu would suddenly speak, and she was jolted by a shock. She then said in a rather embarrassed voice, I'm a little hungry. Qingyu tossed her a ripe red apple. Eat this. Yin Shiro caught it reflexively and then asked in a puzzled voice, Where did you get this? The proprietress gave it to me. If you are hungry, there's more here. Yin Shiwu looked over to her and saw a plate of apples placed on the table. They were all big and red, and there was also a plate of snacks beside them. She was rather surprised. The lady boss looks like she loves money as much as life. To think that she is willing to prepare this for all the rooms. It must have cost her quite a tidy sum. Qingyu arched up an eyebrow. Only our room has it. Yin Shiwu became even more surprised. You are well acquainted with the lady boss? Qingyu shook her head. Money makes the world go round. She accepted the core crystal of a level 6 spirit beast from me, hence she would naturally take extra good care of us. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. Yu Yin Shiwu bit into the apple with a crunch and said as she chewed, "You're, chomp chomp, quite clever." Qingyu smiled and did not give any further response. After hearing Yin Shiwu chomp down a good half of an apple, Yin Shiwu suddenly paused in her actions and called her name. Qingyu. Qingyu then lifted her eyes to look at her. Yin Shiwu took another bite out of the apple and chewed noisily before swallowing as she contemplated how she was going to phrase her words. A good while passed before she then said, "In the past, I might not have been all that friendly to you. You know the kind of character I am, willful and unreasonable, but I am actually not a bad person at heart." Chapter 136. 4. Frankly expressed goodwill. Qingyu had not expected her to say such words all of a sudden, and she merely curved the ends of her lips up to respond with a simple, "I bullied you and Little Bay in the past because Yinning Luo was always bullying me and second sis, using her position as the eldest daughter and her status as a princess. Although she did not outright abuse us physically or verbally, but she was always intentionally and unintentionally trying to humiliate and shame us in order to portray her superiority and noble status." Yin Shiwu then bit viciously into her apple to vent out the rage she was feeling inside. "I was feeling unbalanced, and that was why I want to bully you guys. I know that what I did was wrong, but my character was just like that, at times rather irritating and not exactly smart as in the brain as well." Yin Shiwu paused for a while, and her eyes were shining slightly. "Although they all say that Yinning Luo is the Green Wave's most prodigious lady, I feel that you are so much more talented than her. Moreover, you are also more beautiful than she is, although you are very bad at times as well, making fun of me and scaring me, but you have never really done anything against me. You are so intelligent, and if you had really want to do something to me, I think I would have died more times than I can count. You are not a vicious and scheming woman like Yinning Luo, who puts herself up above everyone, so that people would not realize how deeply she schemes against others. I have come to think that you are rather nice at times. At least when I'm hungry, you will give me something to eat. I've decided that I will listen to you from now on, and will not oppose you anymore." After saying that, she went on to lower her head shyly, afraid that Qingyu would laugh at her. But after a good while has passed, there was still no response. Her brows creased up, and she was just about to say something when Qingyu suddenly said in a soft voice that was tinged with slight mirth, "Aren't you being rather smart now? I had thought that you were completely heartless and did not realize it at all." Yin Shiwu raised her head up in surprise. You do not hold anything against me for all the things I have done to you in the past?" Qingyu then replied with a laugh, "Just like you said, if I really want to settle the scores with you, you would have died an uncountable number of times by now." Yin Shiwu blushed slightly, but she was greatly moved by what Qingyu had said. She hesitated coyly for a while before she slowly came to ask, "Then, why did you not do anything against me before? Is it because you felt that I really wasn't that mean at heart?" Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. Qingyu lifted an eyebrow with an indiscernible smile on her face. "Actually, I am someone who bears grudges at times." "Then why?" Her long, slanted phoenix-like eyes looked highly amused. "I did not really hold it against you because I felt that competing with someone with an immature mind would make it seem like I am bullying a little child." As she thought, all the good feelings she had felt coming from the young lady were all highly misconceived. Chapter 137. 1. Someone died. She had probably been ravenous with hunger, as Yin Shiwu felt full only after having eaten 2 whole apples and went asleep satisfied. Things were peaceful and uneventful here on this side, but for all the others staying at the same and who had come to take part in the recruitment trials, it was not known whether they were hallucinating, but they were feeling that the temperature seemed to become colder and colder as they lay in their beds. At first, they were all sleeping by themselves on their own beds, and then it became 2 or 3 of them squeezing themselves together, the blankets piled thickly together over them, but they were still trembling with cold. It did not help even when they gathered their spirit energies in their bodies, their faces turning pale as they froze. Why do I feel so cold?" A young girl's teeth chattered as she asked the other young girl sticking close just beside her. The girl named Yi was also trembling severely as she lifted her eyes to look out the window. Has it started to snow? As she spoke, she crawled out from under the blanket with much difficulty, thinking to open the window to see outside. In the end, she accidentally knocked over the teapot on the table while walking over there, and the little half of the tea inside the pot spilled onto the floor. In that instant, the tea quickly froze at a speed visible to the naked eye, as a frosty mist emanated from it. The two girls immediately stared with their eyes widened, gasping in shock. The girl on the bed suddenly broke into tears, crying softly, sad and afraid. Boo-hoo-hoo. What kind of a scary place are we in here? We'll surely die here. Boo-hoo. I want to go home. Stop that. Stop crying. Yi admonished softly, and then waved her hand to light the candle in the room, which brightened up a portion of the room. But the light from the fluttering flame made the room alternate between light and in darkness, the flame extremely weak, like it would go out at any moment. The girl stopped her sobbing weakly. Tears welled up in her eyes as she looked at the other girl. Then what should we do now? Yi knitted up her brows and was just about to say something when she heard a shrill scream rang out next door. A flurry of footsteps immediately followed that was accompanied by a girl's terrified scream. Eek! Someone died. With such a big commotion, everyone was alerted. They had all not been able to sleep because it was too cold, and now that someone has been killed, they all broke out in cold sweat from shock. Yin Shiwu woke up still feeling groggy and saw that Qingyu and the others have already woken up. She rubbed her eyes and sat up. What happened out there? Why is it so noisy? Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. Ew, seems like someone died. Yin Shiro sighed inwardly, thinking that this fella here was really taking things so easy. It was thought that she was the only one who could fall asleep. What? Yin Shiwu's eyes widened in surprise. She had originally still been feeling rather sleepy, but she was now fully awake. She immediately flipped off her blanket and climbed out of bed. How could someone die so suddenly? Should we go take a look? We were just about to wake you, Qingyu said as she looked at her indifferent glance. Chapter 137. 2. Someone died. Seeing that, Yin Shiwu rubbed her nose, slightly embarrassed. The commotion had come from the innermost room on the second floor, and everyone was gathered there at that moment. The place jammed packed with people as sounds of angry argument rang out from inside. How did such a thing happen? He was fine when we spoke earlier, and he is now suddenly dead. How would I now? I was feeling cold and was going to brew a hot pot of tea. I had just lit the candle when I saw this fella staring at me from his bed. The blood spilled over the entire bed. Why are you looking at me like this? You couldn't possibly be suspecting that I killed him, do you? There are no grudges between us, so why would I want to kill him? The two of you were arguing earlier just today, and if not for the fact that everyone pulled the two of you back, you guys would have gone at each other's throats. You must be joking. This fella has such a bad temper, and heaven knows how many people he has offended on his way here. Why are you suspecting me now? He even went on to quarrel with the lady boss of this inn in front of everyone, so why don't you say that the lady boss bore a grudge and secretly came to kill him in the middle of the night? Upon hearing the loud argument, everyone then realized that the person who died was the tall and brawny hot-headed youth they had all seen earlier that afternoon. The crowd parted slightly at that moment, and the scene inside the room could be seen. The youth's eyes were open in a wide stare, and he had a large hole opened in his abdomen. Bright red blood stained the entire bed and had also spilled onto the floor, a highly grisly sight. Someone within the surrounding crowd whispered softly, "Such a pitiful sight. Just how great was the grievance?" Sigh. It's little wonder. The kid always had such a fiery temper, and he doesn't hold back on his words at all. Maybe he crossed somebody before and did not know it. Now, retribution caught up with him. But that is just too brutal. The wound on his stomach is really not small at all, and he died with his eyes open. He must have been in great agony when he died. Disaster really does stem from one's mouth. Hearing these people debate, it seemed like everyone has already decided that the culprit was really the youth who was still arguing vehemently. Qingyu stood at the back of the crowd. her gaze looking at the youth who died with unresolved grievance. Her eyes darkened when she noticed something strange about the wound, where the edges looked highly uneven, seemingly caused by a sharp weapon. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU it looked like. Something had torn his stomach out, biting through his body. You all cannot just make such wild accusations. The eyes of the youth whom everyone thought was the killer had turned red, with so many fingers being pointed right at him. Even though he was a little scared, he still stubbornly gritted his teeth, unwilling to lower his head. Lan Yu, what happened? A gentle female voice rang out suddenly. With a white fox fur coat draped over her back, a slim-figured young girl suddenly came walking over. The young girl was very pretty, her tiny face almost the size of a palm enchanting, looking so very weak and frail. You're tuning in to the Romance Rendezvous YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.